The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Dasha, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the Friday, December 12th issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. On the front page, above the fold, we have a large photograph of floods bringing the evacuation order in the Pacific Northwest. There's a picture of a house on a small island of lawn and water everywhere around it. It says days of torrential rain in Washington's Cascade Mountains caused flooding in towns including Arlington, seen on Thursday, as well as mudslides and road and Amtrak closures. Tens of thousands of people were told to evacuate. Another thing on the front page, in Bots versus Hackers, AI is close to winning, by Robert McMillan. After years of misfires, artificial intelligence hacking tools have become dangerously good. So good that they're even surpassing some human hackers, according to a novel experiment conducted recently at Stanford University. A Stanford team spent a good chunk of the past year tinkering with an AI bot called Artemis. It takes a similar approach to Chinese hackers who had been using Anthropic's generative AI software to break into major corporations and foreign governments. Artemis scans the network, finds potential bugs, software vulnerabilities, and then finds ways to exploit them. Then, the Stanford researchers let Artemis out of the lab, using it to find bugs in a real-world computer network, the one used by Stanford's own engineering department. And, to make things interesting, they pitted Artemis against real-world professional hackers known as penetration testers. Their experiment is outlined in a paper that was published on Wednesday. Now, this was the year that models got good enough, said Rob Regan, a researcher with the cybersecurity firm Bishop Fox. His company uses large language models, or LLMs, to build a set of tools that can find bugs at a much faster and cheaper rate than humans during penetration tests, letting them test far more software than ever before, he said. Initially, Stanford cybersecurity researcher Justin Lin and his team didn't expect too much from Artemis. AI tools are good at playing games, identifying patterns, and even mimicking human speech. To date, they have tended to fall down when it comes to real-world hacking, where they have to do a series of complex tests and then draw conclusions and take action. We thought it would probably be below average, Lin said. But Artemis was pretty good. The AI bot trounced all except one of the 10 professional network penetration testers the Stanford researchers had hired to poke and prod, but not actually break into their engineering network. Artemis found bugs at lightning speed, and it was cheap. It cost just under $60 an hour to run. Reagan says human pen testers typically charge between $2,000 and $2,500 a day. But Artemis wasn't perfect. About 18% of its bug reports were false positives. It also completely missed an obvious bug that most of the human testers spotted in a web page. Stanford's network hadn't been hacked by an AI bot before, but the experiment looked like a valuable way to shore up some security flaws in the Stanford network, said Alex Keller, Systems and Network Security Lead for Stanford's School of Engineering. In my mind, the benefits significantly outweighed any risk. He was curious to see what an AI system would find, he said. Also, Artemis had a kill switch, which let the researchers turn it off in an instant should something go wrong. With so much of the world's code largely untested for security flaws, tools like Artemis will be a long-term boon to defenders of the world's networks, helping them find and then patch more code than ever before, said Daniel Boneh, a computer science professor at Stanford who advised the researchers. HackerOne, a company that helps software developers work with ethical hackers, said that 70% of security researchers now use AI tools to find bugs. But in the short term, we might have a problem, Boneh said. There's already a lot of software out there that hasn't been vetted via LLMs before it was shipped. That software could be at risk of LLMs finding novel exploits. Anthropic, which published research about how China-linked hackers were using its models, has also warned of the potential risks. We're in this moment of time where many actors can increase their productivity to find bugs at an extreme scale, said Jacob Klein, the head of threat intelligence at Anthropic. His team conducted the investigation that identified the Chinese hackers. A spokesman for the Chinese embassy said tracing cyber attacks is complex, and that U.S. accusations of hacking smear and slander China, which opposes cyber attacks. AI-powered hacks are presenting challenges in the ecosystem for finding software bugs, often called bug bounty programs, in which companies pay hackers and researchers to find software vulnerabilities. For Daniel Stenberg, AI slop bug reports began appearing last year. Volunteers who work on free software he maintains, a widely used program called Curl, were inundated with useless or erroneous reports. But then, this past fall, something unexpected happened. Stenberg and his team started getting high-quality bug reports. To date, he has received more than 400, but these were created by a new generation of code-analyzing tools, Stenberg said. AI gives us a lot of crap and lies, and at the same time it can be used to detect mistakes no one found before, he said. Artemis made a remarkable find like that during the Stanford test. There was an out-of-date web page with a security issue on it that didn't work on any of the human's web browsers. But Artemis isn't human. So instead of Chrome or Firefox, it used a program that could still read the page, allowing it to find the bug. That software was Curl. In U.S. news, Trump ally Lindell to run for governor. The MyPillow founder has been in court battles for spreading false election claims. By Victoria Albert. Mike Lindell, the founder of MyPillow and a staunch supporter of President Trump, is running to be Minnesota's next governor. I'm still standing, and I'll stand for you, Lindell said in a post on social media Thursday. Let's bring common sense back to Minnesota. Lindell has faced legal and financial troubles for spreading false claims that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Trump due to widespread fraud. No court or election authority has found widespread fraud in the 2020 election. Federal and state officials have said there is no evidence that voting machines deleted or altered votes in that vote. He's spent years entangled in costly court battles with Dominion Voting Systems and Smartmatic, two voting machine companies that he heavily criticized in the wake of Trump's loss to President Joe Biden. Lindell pledges on his campaign website to fight fraud, oppose unlawful immigration, and cut taxes. In the Republican primary, he'll face off against a crowded field that includes Minnesota House Speaker Lisa DeMuth, Attorney Chris Medell, and State Representative Kristen Robbins. The Democratic Governors Association said Lindell's entry into the primary turbocharges what was already a crowded and chaotic race to curry favor with Donald Trump at the expense of the issues that matter most to Minnesotans. The Republican nominee will run against Democratic Governor Tim Walz, who is attempting to become the state's first three-term governor. Walz has faced particular scrutiny in recent weeks following allegations of massive fraud among dozens of Minnesota residents of Somali descent. House Republicans have launched an investigation into how the alleged problems in the state's social services system were able to fester under Walz's leadership. Trump has also weighed in, calling Minnesota a hub of fraudulent money laundering activity, and saying he would end temporary protected status for Somali immigrants in the state. Walz criticized Lindell's candidacy as well as Trump's tenure on X. We've seen what happens when we elect a con man to the highest office in America, Walz said. We can't let it happen here in Minnesota. In short news bits in U.S. Watch, Washington State, heavy rains caused floods and mudslides. Washington was under a state of emergency Thursday from a barrage of torrential rain that has sent rivers flowing over their banks, caused mudslides to crash down on highways, and trapped people in floodwaters. Tens of thousands of residents were under evacuation orders. Heavy rains also brought road closures, water rescues, and suspension of Amtrak trains between Seattle and Vancouver. Rainfall intensity increased in several counties in Washington's Cascade Mountains, which had seen up to 6 inches of rain in 24 hours. One area, Snoqualmie Pass, picked up an additional 1.7 inches of rain in 6 hours, the National Weather Service said. Authorities in recent days rescued people from cars and homes, including an RV park. A landslide blocked part of I-90 east of Seattle, with photos showing vehicles trapped by tree trunks, branches, mud, and standing water. In Tennessee, Nichols, killer and rapist, is executed. Tennessee executed Harold Wayne Nichols by lethal injection Thursday in Nashville for the 1988 rape and murder of Karen Pulley, a 20-year-old student at Chattanooga State University. Nichols, 64, had confessed to killing Pulley as well as raping several other women in the Chattanooga area. Although he expressed remorse at trial, he admitted he would have continued his violent behavior had he not been arrested. He was sentenced to death in 1990. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to issue a stay of execution on Thursday. Pulley's sister, Lisette Monroe, had wanted to be present for the execution, but became too overwhelmed, her husband and Pulley's brother-in-law, Jeff Monroe, told media afterward. He read a statement that said the family, quote, was destroyed by evil the night Pulley was killed. And from Alabama, medical marijuana licenses approved. The Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission on Thursday approved licenses for dispensaries, a key step to making medical marijuana available in the state after years of delay. Commission Chairman Rex Vaughn estimated the products will be available in the spring of 2026. The state's medical marijuana program has been delayed by false starts and litigation over who should hold the licenses to sell and grow cannabis. It's a pivotal day for us, there's no doubt, Vaughn said. The commission approved licenses for 3 dispensary companies. The commission, in the coming weeks, will consider the license for a 4th dispensary. Each company can operate 3 storefronts across the state. Alabama lawmakers in 2021 approved a medical cannabis program after years of resistance and skepticism from lawmakers. All 3 of those stories were from the Associated Press. U.S. jobless claims have risen. The number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment benefits rose last week, but stayed well within the range that has prevailed over the past year. Last week, 236,000 initial jobless claims were filed, up from 192,000 the week before, the Labor Department said. For almost all of 2025, the Labor Department has recorded between roughly 210,000 and 250,000 new claims each week. And the latest figures suggest December didn't begin with any serious pickup in layoffs. Many economists suspect the low late November figure of 192,000 reflected an errant seasonal adjustment factor due to the timing of Thanksgiving. Continuing claims, which show the trend in the total size of the unemployed population, fell in the week through November 29th to 1.84 million versus 1.94 million a week earlier. This from Matt Roseman. And from Ed Frankel, we have non-durables lift wholesale inventories. U.S. wholesale inventories jumped in September at the fastest rate since February, driven by non-durable goods. Inventories at merchant wholesalers rose 0.5% from a month earlier, after declining 0.1% in August, according to Commerce Department figures published Thursday. The gauge is a metric in calculating the U.S.'s quarterly gross domestic product. Non-durable inventories jumped 0.7%, more than offsetting the 0.1% decrease of August. In September, drugs inventories rose on month by 1.9%, groceries by 0.5%, but for apparel, they fell by 0.9%. Inventories of durable goods rose by 0.3% from a 0.1% on-month decline in August. A letter from Will Fitzgerald of Katy, Texas, says why AI CEOs can't succeed. I am excited about the potential for artificial intelligence, but the suggestion that it will be able to replace CEOs frightens me. From AI's Next Challenge, Take the CEO's Job Technology, December 8th. My mind immediately went to Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. a character known for his ruthless business tactics and lack of compassion. Is that the future of AI CEOs? Cold and calculating? AI can enhance decision-making, but it won't replace human values. Let's ensure we keep executives like George Bailey, leaders who balance profit with purpose and empathy, or at least let's require companies to install a chief humanity officer to ensure AI CEO decisions are checked against ethical standards and the well-being of employees and communities, preserving the necessary human touch in corporate governance. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. On the opinion page, we have The Economic Roots of Grade Inflation by Joseph Epstein. Mr. Epstein is author, most recently, of Never Say You've Had a Lucky Life. The one form of inflation that can't be blamed on Joe Biden is grade inflation. Evidence of this practice is the preponderance of A's in student grades at Harvard and other formerly elite universities and colleges. Nearly everyone these days turns out to be an A student. While many factors have contributed to grade inflation, I believe it began in earnest as student evaluations became widespread in the 1960s, an offshoot of the student protest movement of that day. At a term's close, students graded their teachers. These evaluations could affect whether an academic department bestowed tenure on a young professor or promoted an associate professor. A large number of negative evaluations could do a teacher in, even cause him to be fired. Student evaluations encouraged informality in the classroom. Many young professors ceased to come across as authority figures, but presented themselves as contemporaries of their students, all but equals. Professors no longer regularly wore jackets and ties or dresses to class, but came in jeans. They addressed students by their first names, and in some cases encouraged students to do the same to them. Love affairs between young professors and undergraduates, once the cause of scandal and immediate dismissal, became more common. It isn't easy to give a C or D, let alone an F, to someone with whom you're sleeping. Student evaluations tended to be unimpressive, if those I received during my years teaching English at Northwestern University are an example. "This guy knows his stuff," read one. "I like his bow ties," read another. "I wish some of the novels in this course weren't so long," went one, complaining less about me than about Henry James. I retired from teaching in 2002, and only one interesting evaluation sticks in my mind after all these years. I did well in this course, but then I would have been ashamed not to have done. But the real effect of student evaluations was to make many professors change how they issued grades. A teacher known as a tough grader might fail to attract students and receive negative student evaluations in ways that could affect his professional future. Soon, A's were flying about the joint. An A became less a sign of intellectual superiority than a common grade like the gentleman's C of an earlier day. The students attending Northwestern, as at many other schools, have what I call the habits of achievement. They did what their professors asked of them. Read the book, wrote the paper, and usually on time. What the hell, why not give them A's? Who gets hurt if in a classroom of 30 students, you as a teacher give out 24 A's? Nobody really. All that is forfeited is the notion of merit. A meritocracy sets a standard, posits an ideal, gives the more ambitious people in a society something to look up to and to shoot for. It can't exist when nearly everyone is an A student. Not that school grades are the only measure, or even an especially good measure of intelligence. Many a genius has been not all that good at learning in a formal school setting. Blaise Pascal, Leo Tolstoy, and Albert Einstein are notable examples. Perhaps they were bored by school. Perhaps they saw too far beyond what the classroom had to offer. Still, lowering classroom standards by inflating grades can't help. Making everyone equal only levels out society, in some cases sending the wrong people to medical and other professional schools, and allowing too many people to have an exaggerated ideal of themselves. Like other forms of inflation, grade inflation ultimately means exaggeration, and neither in the marketplace nor in the classroom is exaggeration a good thing. In Review and Outlook, we have the real reason Europe is, quote, decaying. European leaders are furious at President Trump following his recent derogatory comments about their continent. This is becoming an instructive diplomatic fiasco, even if it's one in which Dr. Trump botches his diagnosis of the continent's most serious problems. The administration's national security strategy last week stirred outrage by warning that America's European allies face civilizational erasure. Mr. Trump's foreign policy panjandrums mean primarily that mass immigration and deepening political illegitimacy are sapping Europe's vim and vigor. Mr. Trump followed this week by describing Europe as weak and decaying. The strategy, a brainchild of Vice President J.D. Vance and his circle, implies the U.S. may withdraw from its long-standing security cooperation with Europe if Washington decides Europe is no longer worth defending. A particular threat concerns the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The strategy paper warns that mass, read Muslim, migration means that some NATO members could within a few decades be majority non-European. Messrs. Trump and Vance have a point. The European Union does too many things, foreign policy, environmental regulation, and the like, badly, that it shouldn't do at all. What it's supposed to do, such as creating a continent-wide free trade bloc, it does poorly. European voters are angry about their leaders' failures to get a grip on a migration crisis now entering its second decade. They're frustrated with the increasing prosperity gap between Europe and the U.S. and with Europe's frailty in the face of foreign challenges, such as Russia's war on Ukraine. Worst of all, they see that their leaders' first instincts are to suppress contrary opinions, which is why free speech is again a hot debate in Europe. The Trump diagnosis ignores the biggest threat to Europe's well-being, that is Europe's generous social welfare states, and the cascading fiscal, economic, and social ills they create. Government social expenditure in the U.S. accounted for 19.8% of GDP in 2024. According to data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In France, the figure was 30.6, in Germany 27.9, and in Italy 27.6. This share will rise as populations age. These columns recently documented the severity of the old age entitlement problem in France and Germany especially. This fact explains much of what ails Europe. Large welfare states require large tax bills to fund them, which is why government revenue reaches 47% of GDP in France, 41% in Germany, and 43% in Italy, but 27% in the U.S. That level of taxation saps incentives for innovation and entrepreneurship. Generous welfare states also discourage work, which partly explains why Europe's labor markets are so sclerotic. Meanwhile, European governments, taxed to the hilt and increasingly indebted, find it difficult to spend more on defense. Hence, the continent's inability to shape events in Ukraine, embarrassing leaders and voters, and deepening the sense of ennui caused by economic underperformance. The question is why Messrs. Trump and Vance stress migration and culture more than these fiscal and economic facts. Perhaps because Mr. Trump doesn't want to reform America's own entitlement state. Mr. Vance often speaks as if he wants to expand the government's role, as if welfare checks and bureaucracy can restore national elan and social unity. Reforming welfare is politically difficult. It is far easier to denounce migrants and European cultural decadence, especially when the U.S. is on a similar, if slower, path to welfare state sclerosis. Immigration is a manageable challenge, now that Europe is starting to grapple with it. Washington could also be a positive influence on Europe, as Reagan's policy example was in the 1980s. Mr. Trump's demand for more defense spending will require welfare reforms that would benefit everyone. But an irony of the Trump-Vance rhetoric is that it could make most of Europe's problems worse. The domestic political allies they want to cultivate in Europe, such as Germany's Alternative for Germany or France's National Rally, are big state, anti-economic reform parties and often are instinctively anti-American to boot. This isn't the way to make friends or spur European revival. Trump puts the oil squeeze on Maduro, also in review and outlook. President Trump is finally taking action beyond rhetorical threats to squeeze Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro out of power. The U.S. seizure of an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast hits the dictator in the pocketbook, which is why he's screaming so loudly. U.S. officials say the ship was flying under the flag of Guyana, although it isn't registered there. The U.S. Treasury previously sanctioned the ship for smuggling Iranian oil. There's no doubt about the legality of the seizure, as it was executed with a warrant. Officials are also leaking to the press that this seizure won't be the last, and we hope that's right. Mr. Maduro relies on oil export revenue to fund his regime and keep his military happy. Without this cash flow, panic may grow in the ranks. All the more so if the oil was headed for Cuba, which relies on Venezuelan crude to keep its lights on. Cutting off oil flow to Cuba could increase unrest in Havana. Mr. Maduro is accusing the U.S. of piracy, but he's the one who stole Venezuelan democracy and caused millions of his countrymen to flee. More than 8 million Venezuelans live in exile, destabilizing societies across the hemisphere, while he props up the aging Cuban police state. The seizure signals that Mr. Trump isn't backing down on his effort to oust the dictator. This wouldn't be a coup, but a liberation for Venezuelan democracy. Mr. Maduro lost a presidential election in July 2024 to opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez, and he's stayed in power through theft and terror. Meantime, opposition leader Maria Corina Machado arrived in Oslo Wednesday after a daring escape from Venezuela with U.S. help. She was too late for her Nobel Peace Prize ceremony, but not too late to speak to a crowd that gathered to see her for the first time in public in nearly a year. Ms. Machado praised Mr. Trump's pressure campaign to remove Mr. Maduro and restore democracy. She called the seizure of the tanker a very necessary step because the regime uses those resources to repress and persecute. Her escape suggests that the CIA may have sources in the country that can help with a democratic restoration. Mr. Maduro's thugs may have wanted to grab her on the way out, but they will be more intent on making sure she doesn't return. She acknowledged that the risk of going back is perhaps higher. She quickly added, "I'll be back in Venezuela. I have no doubt." Having committed the U.S. to oust Mr. Maduro, Mr. Trump is obliged to follow through. And finally, in the review and outlook, another $12 billion for a tariff bailout. President Trump said Monday he's delighted to give American farmers $12 billion in economic assistance. According to Mr. Trump, this money will be coming from his tariffs, which is interesting in that much of the pain farmers are feeling is also coming from his tariffs. Now watch as the left hand pays off the right. Soybeans are a particular case study. China is the world's biggest buyer, but Mr. Trump's recent trade escalations caused Beijing to halt U.S. soybean imports. In October, a deal was reached that news reports say will result in China's purchasing about 12 million tons this year, though that's down from closer to 30 million in the past. Caleb Ragland, the president of the American Soybean Association, said Tuesday that federal aid would cover only about a quarter of the average losses on the crop. "This is a Band-Aid on an open wound," he told CNN. "We're thankful that there's something, but this will help keep some farms in business, but what we truly need are market-based solutions. Those are sustainable long-term." What farmers want, Mr. Ragland added, is opportunities to make a living, to make a profit from the market, not being dependent on the next program to keep us from bleeding to death. As if Mother Nature weren't erratic enough, now farmers are subject to the whims of politicians. On Monday, Mr. Trump hinted that the Chinese might soon be buying big, saying he recently spoke to Xi Jinping and "I think he's going to do even more than he promised." Where has the public heard this kind of talk before? In 2020, when he signed a historic trade deal with China, Mr. Trump's team bragged of billions in pledges to buy U.S. farm goods. Though soybean exports managed to reach their pre-trade war levels over 2020 to 2021, they still fell over 30% short of their target, according to a 2022 report by the Peterson Institute for International Economics. By the way, this was while the first Trump administration spent $20 billion on aid to farmers after it derailed their exports. "Trade wars are good and easy to win," Mr. Trump once boasted. Then why does he keep needing to divert billions of dollars to compensate people whose livelihoods are collateral damage? Mr. Trump promised Liberation Day. He's offering farmers a bailout instead. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. There is an extra special section today, the Journal Report C-Suite Strategies, talking best managed companies of 2025. If you would like someone to read that to you, you can call 716-821-5555 and staff will read it to you. Turning now to the business and finance section. In the markets section, OPEC maintains view for global oil demand by Julia Petroni. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries left its oil demand outlook unchanged as it prepares to pause output increases in early 2026, but modestly raised its forecast for this year's supply growth from rival producers. The Vienna-based cartel expects demand to grow by 1.3 million barrels a day this year and 1.38 million barrels a day the next, supported by expectations of steady economic growth. Supply from producers outside of the wider OPEC Plus alliance is now expected to rise by 960,000 barrels a day this year, above previous projections of 920,000, mainly driven by the U.S., Canada, Brazil, and Argentina. Next year's supply growth is still expected at 630,000 barrels a day. OPEC raised its economic growth estimates for this year to 3.1% from 3%, citing easing trade tensions after a series of agreements between the U.S. and key partners. Stimulus measures and monetary easing in some major economies are also expected to support activity. Economic growth for next year is still projected at 3.1%. In November, OPEC crude oil production was broadly unchanged, slipping by only 1,000 barrels a day to 28.48 million barrels a day, while total production by OPEC Plus members rose by 43,000 barrels a day to 43.06 million barrels a day. The Oil Exporting Alliance is set to add another 137,000 barrels a day in December, matching October and November increases, but will pause further hikes in the first quarter. In a sign of further caution, top oil exporter Saudi Arabia, the de facto leader of the cartel, recently cut the price of its flagship crude grade to the lowest level in 5 years. Brent crude traded around above $61 a barrel on Thursday, while West Texas Intermediate hovered around $57 a barrel. In technology, the Palantir suit alleges rival poached staff. The complaint says Percepta's CEO built a copycat company after exiting Palantir. This is by Victoria Albert. Palantir is expanding its legal campaign against a rival artificial intelligence company, accusing the CEO and 2 other employees of engaging in a sprawling effort to poach Palantir's workers and customers. The data analysis firm, co-founded by a group including Alex Karp and Peter Thiel, said in a court filing that Percepta CEO and co-founder Hirsch Jain and co-founder Radha Jain, no relation, aggressively pursued Palantir employees for a copycat company in violation of their non-solicitation agreements. It accused a 3rd employee, Joanna Cohen, of stealing confidential documents from Palantir before she left for the rival firm. Percepta said that it has never used any of Palantir's confidential information and accused the company of cherry-picking out of context information, calling Palantir's case baseless. Percepta's business is fundamentally different from Palantir's. Palantir does not own the AI transformation space, which is massive and constantly evolving, Percepta said in a statement shared by General Catalyst, which launched the company this year. This is the latest in Palantir's effort to use fear tactics to bully ex-employees out of innovating with implied AI. Hirsch Jain, Radha Jain, and Cohen are all former Palantir employees. The document, filed Thursday in U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, builds on a lawsuit Palantir filed against Rada Jain and Cohen in October. Defendants brazenly disregarded their contractual and legal commitments to Palantir and instead chose a path of deception and unjust competition, a path they continue trundling down to this day, and that irreparably harms Palantir and their ex-colleagues, the company said in its Thursday filing. Palantir sells software to centralize, manage, and analyze large quantities of data. It dived into the white-hot AI market with a surprise announcement from CARP in 2023 and has since become the mainstay data and AI contractor for the U.S. military, other government agencies, and corporate customers. The U.S. Navy earlier this week said it awarded Palantir a contract valued at hundreds of millions of dollars to manage the supply chain of its nuclear submarine fleet. The legal action is part of a wave of legal battles over trade secrets in the AI sector, with companies such as Elon Musk's xAI suing ex-employees and competitors for alleged infractions. Palantir said Rada Jain and Cohen didn't publicly disclose that they had joined a rival firm until Percepta's launch in early October 2025. Hirsch Jain recruited Rada Jain after he left Palantir in August 2024, according to the filing. The pair allegedly worked to recruit other Palantir employees in violation of their non-solicitation agreements. Rada Jain resigned from Palantir in November of that year. The company said Percepta's workforce and founding team are now disproportionately composed of ex-Palantir employees. That was Hirsch Jain's intention, the filing said, citing an alleged text to Rada Jain in which he said, "I'm down to pillage the best devs at Palantir when they're at their maximum richness." The filing also accused Rada Jain of working with Percepta to pitch a potential Palantir customer while still employed at the data analysis firm. That customer signed with Percepta, the suit said, which has generated millions in revenue for the company. Cohen, the filing said, sent herself a slate of highly confidential documents around the time of her resignation in March 2025. The filing further alleged that she used her personal phone to take photographs of confidential information on her Palantir computer in what the company called an obvious effort to evade Palantir's data security systems. Palantir had previously leveled similar allegations against Cohen and accused Rada Jain of violating her non-compete. Attorneys for the pair said in a November legal filing that they deny the allegations. The pair temporarily agreed to stop working for Percepta while proceedings continue, according to the November filing. In other business news, Altria CEO Gifford will retire, CFO Mancuso said to take over by Nicholas G. Miller. Altria Group said Chief Executive Billy Gifford will retire in May and named its current Chief Financial Officer, Sal Mancuso, as Gifford's replacement. Gifford, who's been CEO since 2020, will serve as a consultant to the company following his retirement through at least the end of 2026. Mancuso has been with the company since 1990 and served as CFO since 2020. His compensation as CEO is yet to be determined. Heather Newman, Altria's Chief Strategy and Growth Officer since March 2022, will become the company's new CFO, effective May 14th. As part of the compensation tied to her appointment, Newman received a stock grant valued at $1.5 million that will vest in 2030. Texas sues data firm Epic Systems over health records, by Anna Wild Matthews. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed an antitrust lawsuit against healthcare technology giant Epic Systems, alleging the company's setup can block parents from accessing their children's health information. The suit, filed Wednesday in a Texas state court, said the default configuration for the Epic's patient healthcare portal, MyChart, could limit parents' access to the health records of their teenage children. The lawsuit also said that Epic uses its power over patient data and its medical record system to block competition. Epic runs an, quote, anti-competitive playbook, end quote, that is intended to prevent any challengers to its monopoly in electronic health records, the complaint said. Epic's software is widely used by hospitals to record and track patient information, as well as for an array of related functions that tap into that data. An Epic spokesperson called the suit flawed and misguided. The lawsuit stems from the Paxton's legal battles over gender transition treatments for minors and parents' ability to get information about their teenage children's care. Yet the complaint's focus is far broader, challenging many alleged business practices of the powerful vendor of healthcare information systems that are at the heart of many U.S. hospitals' operations. Epic has inserted itself as gatekeeper over the underlying patient data gathered through its medical record systems, making it difficult for hospitals to control their own data and switch to rival electronic medical records providers, the lawsuit said. Epic has also shut off access to its technology for competitors or potential competitors and imposed penalty fees on its own hospital clients if they try to use competitors' tools, the lawsuit alleged. Paxton said he was going after companies that undermine parents' rights to their children's data, and the suit aims to ensure that Texans can readily obtain access to these records and benefit from the lower costs and innovation that come from a truly competitive electronic health records market. Epic said the complaint represented, quote, a failure to understand both Epic's business model and position in the market, end quote. Clients frequently share information with healthcare apps, the company said. It also said that decisions about parental access to children's medical records are made by doctors and health systems, not by Epic. The Texas suit echoes complaints that some Epic competitors and software providers have made for years, including in prior litigation. A federal judge recently decided that a suit against Epic by healthcare technology company Particle Health could move forward, though some claims were dismissed. Naturgy shares drop after BlackRock offloads part of stake, by Joshua Kirby and Amy Look. Shares in the Spanish energy group Naturgy sank after major investor BlackRock sold off part of its stake in the company. BlackRock's global infrastructure partners sold the €1.7 billion, equivalent to $1.99 billion, stake in Naturgy, according to a regulatory filing. The BlackRock Fund is one of the largest shareholders in Naturgy, according to FactSet data. BlackRock declined to comment on the sale. Spokespeople for Naturgy didn't respond to a request for comment. In trading on Thursday, the Madrid-listed shares in Naturgy fell 6.7%, or €1.74 to close at €1.74 to close at €24.42. The sale via accelerated book build accounts for approximately 77.1% of Naturgy's share capital, the Spanish market regulator said. After the sale, GIP will still retain an 11.42% stake in Naturgy, which will be subject to a 90-day lockup period, according to the filing. In business and finance, Rivian expands hands-free driving, by Christopher Otts. Rivian is doubling down on the AI-centric approach to develop fully autonomous vehicles as the unprofitable electric car maker faces a tough market for its trucks and SUVs. Rivian's hands-free driving feature will be updated later this month to more closely resemble Tesla's system when the company expands its availability to a territory more than 20 times its current size. Rivian has also developed its own computer chip, as Tesla has, to enable its vehicles to quickly process data from the road and feed the AI model that powers its self-driving. As more Rivians are on the road, more real-world data will be generated to train the company's AI model that powers its self-driving function, Chief Executive R.J. Scaringe said. Our approach to building self-driving is really designed around this data flywheel, Scaringe said at its Autonomy and AI Day in Silicon Valley on Thursday. Investors seemed underwhelmed. Rivian shares closed down 6% at $16.43 on Thursday. Next year, the company's newer vehicles will get point-to-point hands-free navigation, the next step toward offering drivers the ability to take their eyes off the road and eventually relinquish any role in the driving, Scaringe said. He didn't give a timeline for the eyes-off and fully autonomous features. Rivian's hands-free driving feature will expand later this month to cover 3.5 million miles of roads in North America, up from about 135,000 miles of divided highways today. The improvements will be available on the second generation of Rivian's R1 trucks and SUVs, sold since mid-2024. In March, the company will start charging for its hands-free feature, either $50 a month or a one-time charge of $2,500. Tesla charges $99 monthly or $8,000 for its driver assistance product. Rivian, which has sold high-end EVs at a loss for its 14-year history, is under pressure to reach profitability and expand its appeal. The company plans an SUV called R2 next year that will start at $45,000, significantly less than its current trucks. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. One of the front page stories in Business and Finance is that Oracle shares pressure NASDAQ market, by Heather Gillers and Peter Rudiger. Oracle shares fell sharply on Thursday, a stark display of investors' concerns about tech companies overspending on artificial intelligence infrastructure. The stock closed at $198.85, down 11%, its worst day since the January tech rout spurred by the success of DeepSeek, a Chinese artificial intelligence startup. Oracle was the worst performer in the S&P 500 and helped drag the NASDAQ composite into the red, even as the Dow Jones Industrial Average climbed and the S&P 500 climbed to records. Oracle snapped a 7-day streak of gains and raised new worries about the AI trade that has boosted markets to records this year. The company emerged as an AI darling earlier this year, in September, posting a one-day gain topping 30%, after signing up OpenAI and others to big contracts for its advanced cloud computing services. But that business model required Oracle to spend tens of billions of dollars on NVIDIA chips and networking equipment for data centers it leases. Those outlays came well before it books the revenue from those long-term contracts, and before it could demonstrate that renting access to AI computing was a durable or profitable business. It's like the poster child of the AI bear case, said Jay Hatfield, chief executive of Infrastructure Capital Advisors. Much of Oracle's stock slide happened just after the company announced increased spending plans on artificial intelligence infrastructure on its earnings call Thursday, Hatfield said. They essentially validated the ongoing fears about excessive capital expenditures, he said. Even with Thursday's sell-off, Oracle shares are up 19% this year. Oracle's $12 billion in capital expenditures last quarter exceeded analysts' expectations and the amount of cash it generated from its operations. It raised its full-year outlook for capital spending to around $50 billion. How Oracle plans to finance those commitments is a question. Analysts expect the company will need to issue tens of billions of dollars of additional debt, plus tens of billions more it will owe on leases. Chief Executive Clay McGurk told analysts it was hard to say how much money Oracle needs to raise because its customers could supply their own chips to data centers Oracle leased, and because Oracle did decide to rent computing capacity from vendors rather than buy it. He pushed back on estimates that it will need upwards of $100 billion to complete its data center deals, but said only it would need less, if not substantially less, than that. Oracle chairman Larry Ellison, whose roughly 40% stake in the company has made him one of the world's richest people, now faces a one-day paper loss of some $34 billion, Forbes estimated. The ally of President Trump is helping his son David Ellison, chief executive of Paramount, pursue a hostile bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. I think you have a little healthy skepticism, said Richard Steinberg, senior global market strategist at Focus Partners Wealth. Maybe the other 493 stocks can catch up. We can take a break with NVIDIA and some of the more shiny objects. ThyssenKrupp shutters steel plants, warns of job losses from imports, by Adam Whitaker. ThyssenKrupp plans to shutter some electrical steel plants and cut production as a response to imports that it says are undermining the European steel sector. The German industrial company's steel arm said Thursday that from mid-December, plants in Gelsenkirchen in Germany and Isberg in France would be closed until the end of the year. Its Isberg site will then operate at 50% of its total capacity for at least 4 months, beginning in January. ThyssenKrupp Electrical Steel said up to 1,200 jobs in Germany and France are at risk if greater protections for European-produced steel aren't put in place. The move to reduce operations comes as Europe's steel producers are being squeezed by cheap imports, especially from China, as well as by high energy costs and President Trump's trade tariffs on exports to the U.S. ThyssenKrupp said that the measures were in response to the cheap imports that have destabilized the market for European steel. The company cited low-price imports from Asia as a particular problem. In October, European Union authorities said that overcapacity was harming the bloc's steel sector and that it planned a tariff on steel imports above a certain quota. Imports above that quota would face a 50% levy, which is double what the bloc currently charges. The plans are still under consideration and would require approval from the European Parliament and the Council to move forward. Electrical steel is a core component in the power grid and transmits electricity from power plants to households. Eli Lilly's shot shows dramatic weight loss. Experimental drug retatrutide found to help patients lose weight, cut knee pain, by Peter Loftus and Nicholas G. Miller. Eli Lilly said its next-generation weight loss drug, retatrutide, helped people lose up to 28.7% of their body weight after more than a year of treatment, significantly more than what existing drugs can provide. The positive outcome could help clear the path for a big-selling new product that allows Lilly to sustain its booming success in the weight loss market with the high sales of its diabetes and weight loss drugs, Mounjaro and Zepbound. Lilly shares rose 1.6% on Thursday. Retatrutide is the same general category as Novo Nordisk's Ozempic and Wegovy, and Lilly's own Mounjaro and Zepbound. It works by mimicking 3 gut hormones, which helps regulate appetite and can increase a person's energy expenditure. Lilly conducted a phase 3 trial of retatrutide in patients with obesity and knee osteoarthritis, and who didn't have diabetes. The baseline body mass index of patients was at least 35 at the start of the trial, a relatively high level of obesity. They were given weekly shots of the drug or a placebo for 68 weeks. Those taking the highest dose of retatrutide lost an average of 71.2 pounds, or 28.7% of their body weight. In comparison, the highest dose of Lilly's Zepbound has been shown to help people lose an average of 22.5% of body weight, and the average weight loss for Novo Nordisk's Wegovy is under 20%. The study also found that taking retatrutide relieved osteoarthritis knee pain. Patients in the study experienced gut side effects like nausea and diarrhea, which are also associated with the other drugs in the weight loss category. JP Morgan analyst Chris Schott said the rates of these side effects were higher with retatrutide than for older drugs like Wegovy and Zepbound, but were generally consistent with the category. Some patients in the study also discontinued treatment because they'd lost too much weight. Schott said the drug's target population is people with high body mass index scores. We believe retatrutide could become an important option for patients with significant weight loss needs and certain complications, including knee osteoarthritis, said Kenneth Custer, president of Lilly Cardiometabolic Health. The company expects 7 additional phase 3 trials of retatrutide to be completed in 2026. China clears 2 Sanofi treatments by Amy Look. Sanofi said 2 bleeding disorder treatments for both chronic and acute conditions have been approved in China, expanding its hematology offerings in the country. The French pharmaceutical company said Thursday that China approved 2 medicines, Qfitlia and Kevlivy, bringing Sanofi's approvals there this year in China to 5. Qfitlia is an antithrombin-lowering therapy for people with hemophilia, which works to rebalance the body's blood clotting process. Its approval comes after data from late-stage studies show that it had meaningful bleed protection for hemophilia patients, Sanofi said. Meanwhile, Cablivy addresses a rare blood clotting disorder, acquired or immune-mediated thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, Sanofi said. These approvals mark another step in Sanofi's long-term commitment to China, the company said. Earlier this year, it had reached approval for Tzield for stage 2 type 1 diabetes and Sarclisa for multiple myeloma in China. In Heard on the Street, financial analysis and commentary, Oracle can't escape OpenAI's shadow. ChatGPT parent still accounts for most of revenue backlog, while capital spending surge shows no sign of slowing. After 5 decades of selling enterprise software, Oracle has amassed a lot of very large customers. But never before has the company's fate hinged so closely on just one. A lot has happened in the 3 months since the world learned of Oracle's deal to provide $300 billion worth of artificial intelligence computing services to OpenAI. That was just one in a string of expensive deals signed by the ChatGPT parent, which currently generates less than $20 billion in annual revenue. OpenAI's aggressive growth expectations backing those deals look even more ambitious after Google last month launched its powerful Gemini 3 model, which outperforms the latest ChatGPT on benchmark tests and has compelled OpenAI's leadership to claim a code red within the company. As OpenAI is privately held, investors have responded by selling off other companies with significant exposure to the startup. And few have been punished as hard as Oracle. Ahead of its fiscal second quarter report Wednesday afternoon, the stock had plunged 32% during the past 3 months, the third worst performance on the S&P 500 for that period, according to FactSet. That is a particularly brutal turn for a company that was nearing $1 trillion market cap on the premise that AI computing was going to double the size of its business over the next few years. Oracle hasn't backed off that goal, but the company's latest report also didn't settle the growing anxiety investors have about what it will take to get there. Revenue grew 14% year over year, Oracle's best quarterly growth in nearly 3 years, but came in slightly under Wall Street's forecast. Oracle also added nearly $68 billion to its revenue backlog, thanks to new deals with customers like Meta Platforms and NVIDIA. But the company had already tipped that news during an analyst meeting in October. The biggest surprise turned out to be the wrong kind. Oracle spent a record $12 billion in capital expenditures in the November-ended quarter, which is far higher than $8.4 billion Wall Street was expecting. It also boosted its full-year capital expenditure forecast from $35 billion to $50 billion. Oracle's downtrodden stock lost another 11% in Thursday's trading. In a report last week, Moody's noted that Oracle has the highest exposure to OpenAI and the weakest credit metrics among investment-grade hyperscalers. Oracle did say Wednesday that it intends to preserve its investment-grade rating as it finances its AI build-out. But investors are clearly tiring of seeing the money go only one way. This report by Dan Gallagher. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Friday, December 12th issue of the Wall Street Journal. We read from the Wall Street Journal every Monday through Thursday at 11 p.m. Your reader has been Dasha. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the Buffalo Criterion, followed at 8 o'clock by the New York Times, and at 9 o'clock by Buffalo Spree. Stay with us for these readings and more throughout the day. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision,